Podcast for podcasters by podcasters. Podcasting Smarter is the official podcast from Podbean, featuring podcasting interviews, best practices, and helpful tips. We're here to give you the tools, resources, product updates, and news to help you get started podcasting and keep your podcast growing.
Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. We are so excited. Today is AMA Day. AMA Day.
Woo!
My name's AMA Day. My name is Norma Jean Belinkie. I'm the head of events here at Podbean. And today is our AMA, which stands for Ask Me Anything, Ask Us Anything on Podcasting. We are so excited to chat with you today. I'm going to read our brief intro, and then we're going to jump into some questions from our community here at Podbean. Let's get ready to talk all about podcasting. There is no question too small. So here we go. Welcome back, everyone, to Podcasting Smarter and our February live event, the Podbean AMA, where we're answering all of your podcasting questions. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Podcasting Smarter has live stream sessions like this one with top podcasters and industry experts. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Podcasting Smarter podcast, so make sure to check that out as well. This is just one of our live events, and we've got some really fun opportunities for you to join our community coming up in March, as well with the Podbean AI event on March 7th. And before the end of the month, we've got Amplify and Thrive, podcast growth tips from a Black-owned podcast business with Bethany Hawkins from Crackers and Soup. So that's coming up just next week, February 29th. We've also got a really interesting branded podcasting event on March 14th with the RNLI about how they've used podcasting to celebrate the 200-year anniversary of the Royal Naval Lifeboat Institution. So that's a really cool one if you have any questions about branded podcasting or how companies and nonprofits are using podcasting for their brands and to tell the stories behind them. Podcasting Smarter is brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 640,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. And now we'll get started. Hey, John. Hey, Ronnie.
Hello.
Hey.
The question, I guess, to start us all off should be, if it's AMA, it's Ask Me Anything. If it's Ask Us Anything, should it be AUA? Ask Us Anything, AUA? Is that a thing? Because if it's not, it's starting here.
AUA.
Well, it's the collective me.
It's the collective me. Right. Exactly. And so we're joined.
Yeah, like the royal we.
Exactly. I was thinking the same thing. It's just like the royal we. So we're joined today by Ronnie Gosh, who is our podcast specialist here at Podbean, and John Kiernan, our director of content. So we're so excited to chat. Obviously, we've got a lot of questions from listeners. And before we jump in to our AUA, AMA, Ask Us Anything. Before we jump in, guys, I just want to also say, pop your questions in the chat if you have any questions. And if we don't address it here in today's live, what we'll do is we'll answer it in the chat. Or, of course, you can always email us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com with any of your podcasting questions. And we always just ask, that you keep it kind and professional, especially on the internet. It's a wild world out there. So
And I do promise that I'm typing as fast as I can when I answer the question,
exactly.
Guys. You just got to give me a second. I only have 2 hands.
How many words a minute, Ronnie?
Oh, God. And I was doing writing full time. It was 100 words per minute.
That's a pretty good
Now
expectation.
You need an award.
Now it's not that quick anymore, please.
First off, we have some questions on monetization. So the Passionate Pulse podcast has reached out and asked, can we share effective strategies for monetizing content and key actions and steps to focus on for success? I have some thoughts on this, but John, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, and I think that, this is a question that I think is on a lot of podcasters' minds generally. How do I make money with my show? And I think there's 2 parts of it. There's what tools are available, and then there's how do I get those tools to function for me, right? So I think it's kind of a double-edged question here. And speaking specifically from the Podbean tool set, there's a lot of different things that we have, right? So just speaking about the tools real quick, first off, I would just obviously start off with our live streaming platform, because anybody on Podbean can start up a live stream, whether you're on a paid plan or a free plan, and you can receive donations during the live stream. So just off the bat, if you're able to build live streaming into your workflow, then you can receive donations from your most passionate listeners. So that's already one way. Then there's so many other different ways. We have a built-in patron program where when people donate to you, you can have different tiers where people can submit a variety of different price types to you, and then you can go ahead and give different prizes to them dependent on whatever tier they're on. We have the Apple Podcast subscriptions where you can put out content on Apple Podcast subscriptions. They can pay for that content. You get revenue that way. We also have our advertising platform too. So if you meet the criterion to be part of Podbean's ad marketplace, advertisers can run ads on your show, either programmatic or host-read, and you can receive income that way. So in terms of the tools that we offer, I think that really the sky's the limit from that capability. And as a follow-up to that, how do you get people to activate on these things? For me, it always starts off very simply with a lot of these tools. A lot of it is about building awareness, right? A lot of it is in your shows, in your social media, on your website, in your emails, wherever you can and wherever you have that audience engaging, let people know how they can support you. Let people know that you have these different tools and methods of monetization, and let people work with you in the best way that suits them, right? Maybe people maybe you have a dedicated fan base that really wants to hear extra content from you. Apple Podcast subscriptions or the patron program may be the best way for you. You may have people that really get involved with your live stream. They're asking questions, much like many of you are here, and they want to go ahead and donate in the moment. That's a great method too. Other types of non-Podbean tools that you can always look into are like PayPal donation buttons, buy me a coffee, things like that. So there's lots of different tools, but really the big part of how do I get people to activate on that is really by letting your audience know what's going on and letting them know the ways that they can support you. On the advertising side, the more downloads you have and the more traffic you have coming to your show, the higher likelihood that your show can be chosen and will be chosen by advertisers that want to work with your show and have that symbiotic relationship with your content. So that's kind of a very high level overview of it. We do have a lot of content that does go over that, but I wanted to give I guess kind of an answer that I haven't really given before, because usually we talk about the tools or we talk about like growing your show, things like that. But I think this answer that I've given here is kind of like, here's the total package, here are the tools, but then here's how to get people to activate on your tools.
One thing I also want to point out for podcasters, some of them might have kind of come across this on their own and they might have heard us talk about this all the time, but one thing to help your show is create merch. Even if it's something as simple as going onto, one of those sites like Redbubble or TeePublic and, creating a design. It could be something as simple as like, oh, hey, this is a really funny saying that I say in most of my episodes. And you put it on a t-shirt. If people think it's funny and they're laughing with you, they're going to buy the t-shirt. So that is definitely a great way to kind of not only invest in your podcast to get monetization going, but the people who buy that shirt and wear that shirt become walking advertisements of your podcast.
That's such a great tip, Ronnie. I think you're right. It's like, let the audience advertise for you. And of course,
Exactly.
Yeah. And we all know when you listen to a great podcast, right? You're going to share it. Word of mouth is powerful, right? You're just going to be so excited. You're going to send that link, right? You're going to send that pilot episode link to everybody you know, being like, oh my gosh, I love this show. We have to listen together. So when you have great content, your audience is going to really want to support. And great content it doesn't have to be, we always talk about this at Podbean, doesn't have to be super, Peabody award winning, well produced. It has to be what your audience wants to hear, what you're excited to make. I also just want to mention consistency. Consistency is such a big part of it. Like John said, we have amazing tools at Podbean. We've got, the Apple subscription, like the patron, the live stream, like all of it, right? The ads marketplace. You just want to make sure that you're consistent, and that's consistent in what you're offering. It's consistent in your brand voice. It's consistent in your timing, right? And, this also goes to when you release your episodes every week as well, because that's part of your audience experience, right? You want to make sure that if you're doing a host read ad, right, maybe you're reading an ad on your show for a company or a product or a service that you have a direct relationship with, you want to make sure that it matches the tone of your show. That consistency across the auditory brand of your show should be across the board. And that's going to be in your visuals. That's going to be in how you interact with your audience. You know, are you casual? If you're replying to people on social media, and you always want to make sure you reply to comments, but you know, are you casual, like, hey everybody, how's it going? Or is it like, oh, thanks so much, we're so excited? You know, there's a little bit of a tone consistency that you want to be clear on as well. And once you have that, you're going to start to build in whatever direction you are, and it can take time. That's also something that I want to bring up as well. All progress is good progress, so make sure that you celebrate those milestones along the way as well.
Also, just for anybody that's
Absolutely.
been in the chat here, for anybody that's been part of Podcasting Smarter episodes with Ronnie, myself, Norma Jean, or anyone else that's part of our Wiley team here, if you've heard any of the quotes that we've said or our little idiosyncrasies that would be great for
here
a
we
t-shirt,
go.
drop them in the comments too, because I'm pretty
Oh my
sure
gosh.
that, you know, there's been a lot of us who have been with Podbean for quite some time, and I'm sure that on these Podcasting Smarter episodes, you've probably heard us say some stuff that we keep saying, and maybe it's something that you're like, oh yeah, Norma Jean or John or Ronnie, yeah, they do say that a lot. So on top of the AMA questions that you have, please go ahead and drop those in the comments, because I'd love to know what you think we should throw on a Podbean t-shirt, ladies and gentlemen. That would be great. I'd love
I
to
think
know
we all know,
what
John.
things that we
I think
have.
we all know. If anyone out there can guess what John's catchphrase is, I think they deserve a t-shirt, because I mean, we say it all the time. I'm not going to repeat it yet until it comes into the chat.
Well, you know what? I'm not going to say what it is. Y'all are going to guess in the chat. and
We
I
know
hope you
what
get
it is, John.
Yes.
We're so excited. I mean, honestly, it's something where I think
Right.
we always love interacting with our Podbean community, but yeah, you want to make sure consistency, and I think we'll get there to John's catchphrase, John's personal catchphrase in a little bit, which we have featured on the podcast quite a few times, and is a really important thing to remember. And next, I want to talk about, we have a question from Mickey, who has asked, in podcast descriptions, are there equivalents to hashtags to highlight episode topics, and how can they be effectively used for audience engagement? So yes, the answer is yes. We have tags. You can tag your episodes at Podbean. You can utilize those tags to create customized playlists, which is really cool, right? We have the embeddable player at Podbean. So if you have a website, well, you have your Podbean website, of course, which is built in for every podcast that's hosted with us. But additionally, if there's any other websites that you want to embed your show on, or maybe even that you want your guests to embed their episodes on, which is also a really great feature. I'm just gonna tangent. I'm gonna tangent down right now. But if you have guests on your show, let me just very quickly say, to offer them, hey, you were so great on this episode. If you want to embed the episode on your website, on your in the media page, you can. Here's the embed code. People love that. Number one, people love it. And number two, if you have a website that you want to embed customized playlists on, you absolutely can. You can create tags to customize specific topics or themes within your podcast, and then you can create playlists on the embeddable player that will go over, you know, maybe we'll go with comic book. Maybe it's one particular character or season or supervillain that comes back. You can create a customized playlist on the embeddable player for that specific character. You can create specific character playlists and embed them into your website. So it's a very cool feature, and it really helps people who want to niche down on your content find it and kind of binge the episodes that are relevant to them. Yeah. And we'll pop a link here in the chat about the embeddable player customization and how you can select which episodes and tag, because it's a really cool feature we have at Podbean.
I want to expand on how to make descriptions work for you a bit
Yeah.
more, but I don't know, John, do you want to weigh in on the feature itself, or?
Yeah, I can talk about the feature in a little bit, but I know that you do so much work with talking about show notes and tags and all that, so I would want to leave it to you first before I jump in. I answered the first question pretty explicitly on the first side, so please take this one away while I think about what tags I'm going to use for my is Batman the most troubled superhero in the world tags on my embeddable player.
I thought it was fishing, guys. All right, Ronnie, tell us about hashtags.
It was okay. So obviously, John, correct me if I'm wrong, because I feel like I'm not wrong, and I'm going to say this with my chest. But obviously, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Hashtags and descriptions don't do anything. They're not going to do anything for your podcast. What we're looking at instead of hashtags is keywords. Keywords are what's going to boost your podcast in search engines, in any kind of search for podcasts within like Apple Podcasts. So instead of saying, oh, what hashtags do I use? It's like, okay, how do I make sure that I'm including all the right keywords to make my podcast more findable for people who are searching for that particular topic? So if you want to try to use hashtags, we're using it like in a tongue-in-cheek type way where it's like, oh yeah, because we're here to be hashtag cool kids, like by all means, like stick with the bit. But putting a bunch of hashtags in your description for an episode or for a podcast, like it's Instagram, hoping that if you put 50 tags, you're going to be more discoverable. It's not going to do anything, and it's going to make your podcast look like spam.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
would
really
agree
great
with that,
point.
yeah.
Yeah. And, I do have to say also, in terms of that keyword utilization, we're not there yet where when you Google something, it's going to scan audio. We're not there. And so when people are searching for content, they're using text, right? We're searching via text. And so what search does is it's going to pull up all the text that's relevant and, all the keywords that are relevant. So when you're writing your episode description, when you're writing your episode title even, you want to make sure that you use those keywords. You want to make sure you have a transcript. I mean, for me, this is the hill I'm going to die on. Have a transcript. Have a transcript. And
Not only that, but having chapter markers where you like say like, oh, hey, for this chapter, we're talking about this specific topic. The next chapter, we're talking about this specific topic. Even if you're not like organized by chapter or by segment with your podcast, having some kind of chapter marker to let people know like, hey, we're talking about this for the next few minutes. That will also be searchable within any search engine, which will help boost your podcast. So having those keywords will definitely help you become, SEO powered.
Exactly. And that's really going to help with audience engagement. And, we actually had a great episode on Podcasting Smarter with an audience development professional, Katrin Skapertis, shout out. And she said that, people are also typing into like the chat GPT, like, hey, what are podcasts that you can recommend? And, people are finding podcasts that way. So, if you think about it, like I think people are using ChatGPT maybe to like make grocery lists and stuff like that. But, if you type in like, hey, what are the 10 best travel podcasts? It may pull yours if you're a travel podcast and you use those keywords. So keywords are the hashtags of metadata for podcasts. I think that's a really big one. And like I said, I went hard on the embeddable player. I love that thing. I really do.
Yeah.
John, do you want to round us out? Is there anything else you want to say about, maximizing, highlighting episode topics and how they can effectively be used for audience engagement?
Yeah, no, and I love what we're talking about the tags and about the embeddable player too, because I think we often think so much of simply having our podcast on the directories, which is wildly important, absolutely. And it's one of the things that we talk about in terms of growth. And, it is something that cannot be understated. It's one of the reasons why you go to a hosting platform, to make it easy to get there. But when you think about using these tags and you think about searchability, discoverability, and you think about how to engage an audience, one of the things is, how do I get my audience to really key into what I want them to key into, right? And using those tags and using the embeddable player to create those playlists, that can really help you, especially if you're a podcast that has some tenure. And, when we talk about really finding your niche and things like that, after a while, you probably will start to expand to a bigger audience. You'll start choosing, higher level topics, things like that. So being able to really get granular with those keywords and with those tags and with the embeddable player. I love it too. All those things are going to help you grow your podcast in ways that you might not have even considered before. So, I think everything that everyone is saying is totally valid. And just to, again, kind of be an extra nail here, hashtags are not something outside of being tongue-in-cheek that work for discoverability, right? So definitely using the keyword strategy is not just a great strategy, that's like the only strategy. So I would definitely go down the road of really trying to optimize your titles and keywords. And there's a lot of tools that help you do that nowadays.
There's a lot of tools. And we have some content coming up talking about some of the tools at Podbean that offer that. So we're not going to, it's just a little Easter egg for you there. So I want to talk next about, starting with zero revenue. We have gotten some questions about, people who are interested in podcasting, but don't have a lot of money for startup costs. So in terms of getting started, let's talk about some of the easiest and most cost-effective ways to start. I mean, for me, I want to answer this first. The Podbean app. That's what you want, right? Like, you can record your podcast for free on your phone. It's built in. It's great quality. It's literally built into the Podbean app. So if you have the Podbean app, check that out in terms of recording. It's going to be great quality. You can live stream directly from the app. And like John said, you can get donations from day one. It's really going to help you get things kind of off the ground. There are a lot of free resources out there. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to throw money into it. You should have a mic. If you don't, you can record from your phone with the Podbean app. Like, that's a good place to start, to be honest. Like, if you have zero revenue, if you're starting zero, if you're starting with a couple $100, I'd say, make sure that you have. And you can also edit, really quickly, you can also edit your episodes that you record on the Podbean app in the Podbean app. So cool. Next step off of like the app would be microphone and editing software, any kind of editing software. I mean, we love Hindenburg and Descript. We've got integrations with them. So you can publish directly from those platforms where you're editing or, creating transcripts or anything like that. You can publish directly from them to Podbean. So you don't have to download, re-upload. After that, we can talk about like audio interface and all that stuff. And in terms of microphones, there's a couple out there that are pretty good for maybe a couple $100. If you want to spend $400 or $500, there's quite a few more. John, you and I are both using the MV7 from Shure today, which we love. There's also great, we have a lot of mic recommendations. So Ronnie, we can also pop that link to our mic recommendations in the chat here if you have any questions about that. But just know that like you don't have to have hundreds or thousands of dollars to start. You just have to start. I think starting is the hardest thing. And so don't let maybe the lack of funds or the lack of, whatever you're able to start with stop you. Because literally with the Podbean app, we have an app where you can record and edit and publish directly from your phone from a free app. So you can get started today, really.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm going to just put out a scenario right now, too, because if we're really talking about who submitted this zero budget question, because it's a very good question. And I'm going to take it very much at face value and talk about a really interesting strategy and put over Podbean in the process, because that's why I'm here. So
this was from one of our friends on Twitter.
Hello, Twitter friend. So let's say you don't have a budget, and let's say we're talking about using the Podbean app, because the Podbean app is free. Also, with Podbean, you do get a free 5 hours that you don't have to pay for. So let's say you come in, you say, hey, I have zero budget whatsoever. Like, not even like, okay, to pay for the hosting, but let's say you come in with zero budget whatsoever, right? What are the two things that we have at the disposal? We have the Podbean app. You can start a Podbean account for free. You get those 5 hours and you have live stream. Cool. I don't have any funds. What do I do? Let's go ahead and figure out how you can maximize those 5 hours on the Podbean app for absolutely free, right? So people always ask I'm going to go on a tangent here. I'm sorry. Stop me at any point. So how long is an average podcast episode? Okay. We often say that it's usually 22 to 25 minutes, things like that, right? Let's say it's kind of an average. So what you can do, take that, extrapolate it to the 5 hours, and create a variety of content that puts you at that 5 hours. It hits about 20-minute episodes, right? Then what you can do using the Podbean app is you start a live stream that you do weekly and let people know, hey, I'm doing this live stream. Come check in and It's going to be however long, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever the case may be. But you go ahead and you create the schedule that you're going to be doing your live stream however many times a week. Live stream gets popped up in the Podbean app. You gain an audience through there. You say, hey, if you like the live stream content, check out what I have over on the podcasting content. And you can reshuffle new content, old content. You could just tell people listen to what the podcast content is. You can bring up the strategy of, hey, donate to me here so I can keep the podcast going. They donate to you over time. That pays for your hosting costs. You end up paying. You get the expanded storage. You get the unlimited storage that we have. And then you can record however many podcasts you want. So, it's one of those things that I think people often ask, how do you get started with zero budget? And usually that translates to, I don't have much money to podcast, give me the best solution for the best cost. But I really wanted to take that question into a different way. Let's say you don't have anything.
No, if you have zero,
right?
you can do it with zero budget. Totally. And John, like you were saying, let's say even you make your episodes 20 minutes. You've got 5 free hours. That's 15 episodes. That's almost 4 months if you do a weekly show. So in 4 months, you know whether you're going to want to, how you're going to build revenue from there, right? Hey, I've got a weekly live stream following. Hey, I've put merch online. People are starting to buy it. Hey, I've set up a Patreon with Podbean. People are donating to even just pay for the hosting. So you can definitely bootstrap it. And we're talking like 0. We're not talking like like an ideal 0. We're talking like, okay, I've got a smartphone with an app and a pair of headphones.
Right.
You're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah. And then think about it too. You also get the RSS feed. So it's not that you can't submit your podcast to the directory. So
all of
don't
them.
think that you're also just like landlocked to being in Podbean. You can get on the different directories. You can grow that audience. You have all of these tools at your disposal. So if it is something where you do want to grow and you want to test it out, like you said, you could put that out to about a 4-month period. You have live stream. You could do all these things. And when we say it's really just a matter of getting started and you say, hey, I really just don't have, I have zero budget. You really can get started, grow an audience, and even get a little bit of income potentially to start your podcast in an even deeper way. So where there's a will, there's a way. And with the Podbean app, you have that way for basically zero money too. So
yeah, absolutely. And Ronnie, jump in.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, bear in mind that this is all like hardware. Nothing, there's no like, even the fanciest microphone in the world is not going to help a boring podcast not be boring.
Right.
So one of the best things you can do if you have no money and you're just starting from zero, also perfect how you speak with your podcast, because if you're as engaging as possible, people are willing to overlook quite a bit if they're engaged with the podcast. If they hear some, weird background noises, if there's some pops and crackles as you continue to podcast and as you kind of start building yourself up and you invest in the different hardware, cool and awesome. But if you're not engaging from episode 1, you're not going to get that audience built up. So, practice reading aloud, figure out how you want to pace your episodes, figure out how you can speak without having the awkward pauses. Remember to breathe, because even I don't remember to do that. Worst habit ever. But perfect those things as you're growing your podcast so that you can really start growing your audience from episode 1.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's such a great point, Ronnie. And, the other thing that I also want to say just really briefly, which is kind of tangential to what we're talking about, is that most of the audience growth and podcast growth tactics are similarly free. It's just about how much energy you want to put into posting on social media, to reaching out to other podcasters for episode swaps, for ad swaps, for cross promotion. Most of that is really about research that you're going to do, the network you're going to build, and taking the time to reach out to people in a thoughtful way as well. So a lot of podcasting is life force. You know, it's the energy you want to put behind your show and what you're excited about. So, you know, just remember that. I would say it's probably, 40% skill, 30% tech, and 30% heart and excitement. You got to have all three. They're all pretty important. And next we have a question from another listener, another kind of, I think, a Twitter friend. How can one get a Podbean branded t-shirt or coffee mug? Did anybody put that John catchphrase in there? I think John, we should let it out of the bag.
I'm gonna keep it going. I'm gonna keep it
Oh,
going.
hold on, I'll just pull the shirt off. He can have the shirt.
You got to keep guessing it. And you know what? If you don't get it in this one, you got to come to the next one. And if you don't get it in that one, you got to come to the next one. And if you don't, you get where I'm going. Until somebody gets it. And I'm going to find the emoji for the bell ding, and it's going to be that thing. So
Perfect.
How do you get...
Oh, my God.
So the question is, how do you get Podbean branded stuff, basically? Let's go ahead and extrapolate
Visit us
that
at
out
conferences.
there. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
If you
it.
come to a conference, that's probably the place where we have, as of right now, that's the only place where you can get Podbean exclusive content. We try to be pretty cool with what kind of content there is, though. We've had microphones. We have conference exclusive stickers. We've done that before. We're going to be going back to that. We've done water bottles before. We've done lots of really cool
those
things.
backpacks.
The backpacks are awesome. You know why the backpacks are awesome? Because
Everybody loves the
we
backpack.
started giving those away in like 2020. And the first time we gave those backpacks away was in California. And I came back to our office in New York City, and there was someone walking down the street with a Podbean backpack, and it wasn't me, and it wasn't my coworker. So that's just crazy. They traveled to New York, not to just walk around with the backpack, but they ended up showing up with the backpack. That's really cool. Also talking to Ronnie's earlier point about why podcast merchandise is so important. But the point that we're trying to get to here is, if you want Podbean merch, then you got to come see Podbean at the booth. And we're going to be doing some cool things at the booth also, just going forward. So when you come back to us, maybe there'll be some really cool merch there. And I'm going to pass it over to Ronnie here. I'm going to do a virtual tag. I'm hoping that they're over there and not over here, because
Ronnie's
really
above you.
weird when I do that.
I'm actually above you, so. How's the weather down there? Well, recently, as you might have seen, we've also started giving away merch during contests. We've done some giveaways. We did a giveaway over on TikTok, and we did actually send somebody a Vocaster and a Podbean backpack.
Mhm.
So in the future, keep an eye out on the giveaways that we're doing, because we'll probably give away merch then as well. Not just the backpacks, but we have a fun, cool new toy that we're going to be handing out at Podcast Movement Evolutions that I'm very excited about.
That's
Mhm.
very,
So
very cool.
you'll have to come see me and come get it.
Oh, and one thing I do also want to put Ronnie over on real quick. This is one of our stickers, and this was designed out by Ronnie. This looks super cool. So most of the content that you see designed is designed by the Podbean team, right? So it's just, when you see that, then just give an extra little crisp high five when you see it at the conferences. Be like, yo, that looks really cool. Thank you. So
The crisp high five.
Ronnie
crisp
makes
high
the
five.
best stickers. It's true. There are people who collect Ronnie's limited edition stickers. So just know that there are collectors out there, and that there are some stickers that have been discontinued. They're like, original, never gonna get them again. So Ronnie is the ruler of stickers.
check out our blog
so-
post. You'll see all the contents. You'll see all
Exactly.
of the exclusive
Exactly.
stickers. Yes.
Exactly. And come visit us at conferences. And what's great also about conferences is that if you ever have a question you want to talk to us about, just come by the booth. We talk to people all the time. I mean, we literally help people launch their podcast from the booth sometimes. I mean, it has happened. But any question you have, there's no podcasting question too small. And of course, that's why we're here today. So we also have another question from the Archery Parent podcast. And they ask, when hosting a video or audio podcast, what are some subtle techniques to redirect conversations without seeming rude, especially when wanting to expand on a briefly mentioned topic? Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can go first if that's okay with everybody.
Go for it.
Number one, editing. That's what editing's for. Just know that the great thing about podcasting is that you can edit. So just before we jump into any techniques or tactics, that's what I want to preface my answer with. You can edit it out. Don't worry. Let people have their say. And there's times where sometimes things get edited, and that's okay. That's number one. I think also I've coined this phrase, so you can quote me. I call myself a natural interrupter. And I tell people this before the interview, before it starts. Hey, I get really excited. I just want to let you know I'm a natural interrupter, so I may jump in. And if you set that standard, people will know, oh, hey, you're not being rude. You're just keeping it moving, right? Also, if you want to have short answer to some things, you can also include like a lightning round of questions. Like, hey, I just want to answer these in, 1 minute or less. That can also be a really great technique as well. And don't be afraid to kind of, not cut people off, but jump in with a turn. Jump in with, and we're bringing it back. And it's okay because it's your show. And like I said, you can always edit. So if they really go off and there's nowhere for you to jump in, just know you can cut, or you can repurpose and have multiple episodes with one specific guest. I think that's also a really great aspect as well. You don't have to confine things. You can also expand things. That's also another option. Yeah. So those would be my tips kind of off the cuff. John, Ronnie, do you guys want to jump in?
Fix everything in post-production. No, I'm kidding. No, that is a great one, though.
No, I want to answer the question. It's my turn. Yes, excellent.
Fix it in post-production.
Okay, so
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
John, let me talk. No, there's actually multiple ways to do this, but the first thing I want to point out is that if somebody's mentioned something in passing, but you want to go back to that topic, you can quite easily just say, hey, you mentioned X. Can we bring that back in? Can you tell me a bit more about that? And kind of gradually bring it back into the conversation. The other thing is that regardless of if you're doing an in-person interview, an an interview through Zoom, or if you're moderating a panel, which Norma Jean has done plenty of times, so she'd probably speak on this more than I could. But if you let them know the questions in advance and say, hey, here's the order of questions I'm asking so we can kind of keep the conversation flowing, then they'll know and they'll gradually come to the next step for the next question themselves. And you can even say, oh, hey, yeah, I'm asking them in this order because I want to keep, this particular narrative going with this topic. So there's nothing wrong with letting them know that you're trying to craft something with the episode. And of course, you can fix it in post. But, I think everybody knows that by now. If not, maybe we just need to say it one more time. John, you want to cover me there?
Fix it in post-production. Fix everything in post-production. But
I also want to jump in with a couple of more things. I think, number one, it's a double-edged sword with that, Ronnie, because sometimes if you share the exact questions you're going to ask to your guests, they've already answered it in their head and it doesn't come off natural. It comes off stiff. It comes off a little bit clunky. And so what I always like to do, if I think that someone wants to know the questions first, I'll send them the bullet points of what we're going to talk about. But the way I specifically formulate the questions, I don't always share that because, especially for us at Podbean, we want everything to come off conversational. We're all about community here. We're all about empowering our podcasters. And so we don't want to come off as stiff, right? That's not our brand. And so, when I'm sharing questions or talking points with any of our guests coming on, generally I won't send them the questions verbatim. I'll say, here are the things we're going to talk about, just so that they don't feel nervous. I'm not going to pull any skeletons out of the closet. This isn't like a gotcha interview, but at the same time, they know what to be right. Podcasting, gotcha. Anyways, so I think it's something where it's you want to make sure that you have your talking points. That's important. Feel free to share them. For me personally, I don't share the specific interview questions as a general policy, just because it comes off a little bit more natural and a little bit smooth. And then I also want to say that, there was a great point made years ago by Adela from Podcast Brunch Club, so shout out to her, where I think we were on a Podcast Brunch Club, like I don't know if you guys know about Podcast Brunch Club. For everybody out there, it's great. It's like a book club, but for podcasts. So every month they have a different playlist, and then you meet up with cool people and you talk about it. It's very fun. And so she mentioned once that when you're interviewing someone, not to interrupt, this was her style, but to take notes. And that if you have a thought or you want to jump in or there's something cool you want to expand upon, let the person finish. And then, make sure everything you've kind of written down, everything that you do want to say or you do want to respond to, so that you don't forget in the flow of the conversation. So that's also a really great tip as well. And it really depends on your style, and there's different styles for everyone. Don't feel like there's one kind of set thing and you have to be really formal in your interview. You can create the tone of your show however you want. It's your show.
Yeah. And I think that there's lots of different modes to go down, right? And I think that for someone asking this question, it might not just be in an interview format. This could also apply to multi-person booths like we have here, right? the fact that you're on video, it's very helpful to be able to read people's cues, right? It's very helpful to also say, hey, if I want to go ahead and get something in, there's nothing wrong with throwing up the hand real quick or anything like that. If you're using something like Zoom, you can go ahead and use the raise hand feature there.
Yeah,
If you're
love it.
using, and I go back to Zoom because it's an easy chat window thing. You can also, in the chat, that doesn't even display on the video side, just be like, hey, I want to jump in here real quick, right? And then everybody's looking at the chat. They can then go and say, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, you want to throw something in here? Or they can just know that maybe their tangent is coming or should be coming to a close here to give somebody else the opportunity. There's a lot of different ways to go. I think so long as you try to kind of talk about those things up front before you hit record, it makes it a lot easier. Otherwise, and I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Norma Jean. I don't know if I'm like a natural interrupter. I just know I talk a lot, so it's kind of hard for people to jump in. And I also have like a general like continued cadence, so it's not like you can really find a break. But you will hear in our podcast episodes that Norma Jean does have a really good ability to cut in my cadence. So listen to how
thanks,
Norma
John.
Jean does it.
Yeah, thanks, John. No, but
And then I just never get to talk.
No, but it is something where I think, if you feel like you're somebody who's going to naturally jump in, let people know so that they know it's not personal or they don't feel offended. Because a lot of the time, if you're recording something and you jump in, people can kind of shut down or feel like, oh, maybe, I'm being cut off. And you can just say, on the front end, hey, I get really excited. This is a dynamic interview. I'm a natural interrupter. And just say, if something comes up that I want to expand upon, I'm going to jump in. And, I think if you set the standard with people, and it's up to you as the podcaster to really set the tone for your show, set the tone for your interviews. So, figure out what works for you and go for it. Building an engaged listener base. Engagement. What are some top strategies we can share for growing and maintaining an engaged listener base, especially in niche podcast markets? So I think this was a question from one of our Twitter friends. And I mean, there is a podcast for every niche. Let's be clear about this, right? Like, we love using the comic book example, but there are podcasts that are so specific. I mean, last year we did a virtual event with Kira Deneen from DNA Today. She has a podcast all about DNA. That's her whole thing. And it's so cool. And if you want to learn about DNA, like, that's the podcast. And so I think that, first of all, go hard on your niche. That's I want to start there. I've already started. I'm jumping in. And I have a few more things to say.
That should
but
be
John,
a t-shirt. Go hard on your niche, Podbean.
Go hard on your niche. It's true.
No, it's just commit to the bit.
Commit to the bit. No, because
I
those
love
are
it.
your people, right? Those are your people. Those are your audience. Those are your true fans. That's your true community. And so it's really important that you make sure that you're serving them and that you don't try and dilute your content or your messaging for, an audience that may not be the right fit. So that would be the first thing I say. And I have a few more things to say, but John, do you want to jump in?
Probably when we think about marketing, we think about engagement, we always think about the growth side. We don't often think as much about the retention side, right? And I don't know if that's one of my catchphrases, but I've said that a lot over the years. But the retention side, I think, is probably the part that's the most active part that you have to do as a podcast host. You can put out your content, that's great, but you have to do a lot of work to continue to engage your community, right? You may have a lot of people who are just diehard fans of what you're doing, but you may have other people that at the moment are passive that may turn into diehard fans over time because of the rest of the audience, or maybe there's a lot of different things that you do. I think it starts with your show. I think it starts with your show and creating ways for people to support you, like we talked about earlier, but not just financially. But maybe, for example, if you're saying, hey, there's a segment on my show where I say, if you leave a review, I'm going to go ahead and shout you out on the show, then you go ahead and shout people out like that. It makes them feel like they're helping you build your brand. They're part of that community. Another thing is, one thing that I will always say, probably 99 times out of 100 is a fairly successful strategy, especially when it comes to niche markets. Think about what discussion board you're going to use to continue to engage with your audience. It could be a Facebook group, it could be a Discord server, whatever the case may be. And there's other things out there, but figure out what's going to work best for your audience, figure out what's going to work best for your topic, and create a group where not just you go to engage, but other people can engage and help develop the community too. It's so understated how powerful it can be if you really cultivate a group, cultivate engagement in that way, and grow and scale up from there. Because no matter how much money you throw into your podcast, no matter how much promotion you do, being able to be active in your group and have brand ambassadors for your podcast and for your brand that continue to deliver your message. We used to call those street teams. We probably still do to some degree, but having this dedicated fan base that you're cultivating in one of these engagement groups and all the things that you're doing is going to allow you to continue to grow that base, because it's not just you saying these words anymore. Maybe you're the one who's stirring the pot, cultivating the group, but over time, it becomes your engaged listeners. It becomes your hyper-focused audience who helps create those topics too, who help you with things and who help you build your audience. So one like hyper strategy, especially for a niche market, is figure out one of the engagement engines that you're going to use, one of these groups, one of these discussion boards, and really go hard on that kind of community. And any social media engine has their own things for it. If you're someone that's doing things on Twitch, then just be consistent with your time and be consistent with what goals people can do, right? If you're doing on YouTube, similar thing. But really, if you're trying to do the discussion board thing, you give people the opportunity to create lots of different topics about lots of different things in your niche market. And then also that kind of comes back to you. You may go back to that group and that discussion board and be like, wow, I haven't really covered that part before. Maybe I can bring that up, talk about the group on your show. And then all of a sudden you're off on another branch of your show that just happened by having that engagement. The people in that discussion board are like, oh, the person brought that up on the show. So it's just, again, it's such a symbiotic back and forth relationship. We talk a lot about personal bandwidth. So you also have to really take into account what, oh, everyone's smiling. There you go.
There it is. Ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding.
We won the pot. We won the pot.
So we have to see who in the comments got it too. Please, if no one did, then I'm making myself a shirt, ladies and
I
gentlemen.
mean, John, the first question. Come on. It came out in the first question. We just didn't say it. You did so good. You held off until like for over 45 minutes in. It's great.
Until it had to be part of the conversation, and now it's here. But no,
it just like
yes,
Mount St. Helens is way out.
With that part about the personal bandwidth, think about where creating that engagement and that community is going to fall within your podcasting responsibilities, right? Because if you're thinking about how much time you have to edit, how much time you have to record, how much time do you have to come up with content, one of those pieces that you should dedicate time to is creating that community. Think about how much time you'll have to invest into that, but also think about over time how much time you can have to bring people on board with you. So I would say if you're thinking about how much time you can dedicate to the podcast, that's one of the most crucial parts about it, kind of like a grassroots way of going about it.
Ronnie, did you want to? Yep, I see the hand.
I did. Yes. Okay. So another thing when it comes to, creating that engaged audience is that you want to go where that audience is. So for example, let's go back to the comic book podcast. If you're looking for like the diehard fans of like Dark Horse Comics, which, is one of my favorite imprints of comics, for those who know, if that's the target that you're going for, then go to the source, reach out to, the particular, industry, standard, reach out to Dark Horse, for example, and say, hey, I run my podcast. We mostly talk about your comics. Is there a way that you can promote me in your newsletter? Or is there a way that you can, say something about the episode that I just put out? I have a great example of this, but I don't know how you guys feel about product placement, so I'll hold off for now.
No, share the example.
Oh, cool. I get to bring out my new toy. Yes. Okay.
Say the line, Ronnie.
No, this is why I had to ask to double check first. So I know this looks really strange. It is called the FreeWrite Alpha, and it is an LCD screen. And when I type, it just shows my writing here. So then when I want to focus on writing, it is just this little doodad, and it's not my computer. And what's great about this is that the people who made this were not just going around saying, oh, hey, we're looking for any and all writers who want to do this. They were looking specifically for writers who were in that kind of diehard spot of, okay, all I want to do is write. I have so much going on, but they were lacking the capability of doing so. They couldn't sit down at their computer. They're traveling a lot. So they managed to find their niche, and they put out a couple different products. This is just they did a Kickstarter for this a couple years back, and I finally just got it. And it's like, oh my God, I'm so excited. But being able to really find that small little niche pocket for yourself and reaching to people who are also in that niche pocket, that's really great. But you also want to find the people who are creating that niche pocket, whoever, industry professional, whatever, show, whatever group, and see what you can do to connect with them there, because they'll be able to help you spread out to other people that are really dedicated to that diehard niche.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ronnie. And, I think what you both said is really valuable. In terms of growing and maintaining that engaged listener base, don't be afraid. Like, if you have a little budget, don't be afraid to reach out to people who are big in the space and be like, hey, can I pay you to endorse the podcast? Or, hey, do you want to be a guest on the podcast? Or if they have their own podcast, hey, do you want to do a guest swap? Or, just don't be afraid to reach out to people. And it's all about community building. I mean, one of the top tips we always share about social media is reply to comments. Like, a lot of it is making sure that you are spending the time with your community. And we say this because, like, if you have a podcast about a certain niche, you better like it, right? Like, it's got to be your jam. It's got to be the thing that lights you up. Because otherwise, it can start to feel like a chore. And then you get into things like personal bandwidth, where it doesn't feel fun, or it doesn't feel engaging, or it doesn't feel like it's something that is consistently manageable because it feels like a chore. So I think that that's a really important aspect as well. And like John said, offer to read out reviews. Hey, if you write a review, we're going to start reading them at the end of the podcast. It also gets people to listen through to the whole episode. That's also a great point. Have a newsletter. I love newsletters. I can talk about newsletters all day, every day. We've done entire virtual events, I think multiple, on newsletters. So they're really important and valuable because it's more personal. It's going into the inbox. You can highlight lots of things. You can say, hey, here's this week's episode. Here's why you're going to want to listen. But also, here's some other cool things in our community that you're going to love. Here's some other creators. Here's some other content. Here's some things we have coming up in future episodes. Here's ways to donate and support to the show every week. So, there's lots of different ways to engage with your community. But like John said, it's about personal bandwidth. Ding, ding, ding. And it's really about what you can do that's exciting, that's consistent. Back to consistency. So I think that we've kind of addressed a bit there. But if you have any follow-up questions, let us know in the chat. And next I want to talk about content planning for shareable clips. We are in the age of clips. We're in the age of short order content. Short form content. Sorry. I keep thinking short order, like Waffle House, but no, it's short form.
What do you want with your short order? What do you want with your short content?
I just want
what
a
do you want with
pecan
your
waffle
audiogram?
podcast. That's it. So in terms of content planning, let's talk about, how to produce high value segments that are ideal for promotional clips. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, Ronnie, John. This is kind of all of our wheelhouses. So, Ronnie, why don't you start on this one?
Oh, goodness.
You want me to come back to you?
So here's what I'll say when it comes to, you might have to come back to me. My brain just went. Whoop.
Okay. So, for me, in terms of share. Okay, we'll come back. Ronnie, we'll come back to you. Gather the list of things, wisdom, gather the wisdom. I think in terms of content planning, especially with high value segments, right? We're in the age of Reels. We're in the age of TikToks. We've had a lot of content creators at Podbean specifically come on and talk about it. Kayla Moore from the Heart Starts Pounding podcast, she literally started her following, thousands and thousands and thousands of people through her TikTok. Like that was how she created her podcast following. And that's specific for her niche, and a lot of it was content creation with videos. And she had a kind of a video first strategy, but it's important to think about when you're recording, what are some things you can do to build in for clips, right? Can you timestamp episodes? Can you pull specific moments? Do you want to re-edit? Do you want to do a lightning round of questions? You can get short, snappy answers. When you're recording, even if your podcast is audio, can you record video just so you'll have those clips for social? For Podcasting Smarter, I'll just tell you, our in-house podcast at Podbean, which is a podcast on podcasting. Any question you have, we've probably got an episode answering it. And if we don't, hit us up, podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. But we record with video because sometimes people want, those snappy little answers on our Instagram Reels. They want them, on our YouTube Shorts, on TikTok. And it also offers us the opportunity to share those clips with the guests, to engage, to pad out our social strategy as well. So I think that that's a really important aspect. when you're recording. So even if you're audio, try and get video. And if it's not, your main setup, see if you can get like a secondary view, even if you just set up your iPhone to kind of get like a behind the scenes situation. That's also a really important aspect. And when you're planning out your content, when you're writing your questions for your interview maybe, or you're planning out your show notes, think of that when you're considering those short clips, right? That's what we do. So when we plan out our content, we plan out our questions and our content based on, hey, can we edit this question down to be a snappy clip? Hey, is the answer to this question going to be something we're going to be able to share on social in an effective way that's not, a drawn out episode, but something that's going to directly address to our audience on a different platform. Ronnie, here we go.
Yes. Okay. I figured out what I was trying to say earlier. So regardless of how long or how short the clip is, whether it's, something that's going to be 20 seconds long, something that's going to be a minute long, something that's going to be 3 minutes long, because TikTok lets you go pretty long now, you want to make sure that it's narratively satisfying the entire time. All right. So we've talked before about storytelling, about having the beginning, having the build up to the climax, and then having that little kind of drop off there to kind of tie everything together. You want to make sure that every single clip kind of has that same, like, okay, we're getting into the topic, we're getting it more into the meat of it, and we're coming down to the final point of why it's so important. And then we say, okay, we have more clips coming, or to find out more, check out the rest of the podcast. So you want to make sure that the clip will feel good to listen to. If you leave people on a cliffhanger, or if it's just kind of like, oh, hey, you're reading off a list of facts with nothing else kind of behind it, no emotion or anything, or you're just doing like a clip of like 3 sentences and nobody really knows what's going on, people aren't going to want to listen. They're going to kind of just like scroll past it, because, we live in a sea of content. Everybody's attention spans are incredibly short. So you want to make sure that you are engaging every step of the way.
That's great advice. That's fantastic, Ronnie. I think that's really important as well. You want to grab your viewer, you want to grab your listener. What's going to draw them in? What's going to get them excited? Yeah, and that can be, repeating the question, short answer, with value at the end. I think it's something where it's going to be different for every show, for every podcast. Like you said, 20 seconds, 1 minute, up to 3 minutes. Yeah, but just know that like you can plan it out in advance as part of your podcast recording. So know that you don't have to create double content. That's always good to know.
Yeah.
And we have time kind of for one more question. We've only got a couple more minutes, but this is actually kind of interesting because today we're doing the AMA, and obviously, if we haven't addressed your question, pop it here and we'll answer it in the chat. But also, you can always reach out to us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com, and we've got that email here in the chat as well. And in the description of today's event. But the next question is, how do you effectively organize interviews and Q&A sessions to encourage guest interaction and create content that's both engaging and shareable? So on the shareable side, I think this comes back to what we were saying in terms of planning out your content, right? Making sure that when you're planning your content, are you asking your questions in a way that they can be chopped down and shared? That's a huge one. And in terms of engaging, it's in the chat, it's answering every question. On social, are you replying to comments? And not just like a direct reply, but are you engaging with the community, things like that. And in Q&A, you always want to keep it fun, right? I think that, in today's modern world, it's especially like Ronnie said, in the sea of content, this just came to me. So if it's too weird, let me know. But I always think in the sea of content, be the octopus. Right? Just like be the octopus, be the colorful, exciting creature that kind of moves around. That everybody, like if you've ever been snorkeling, seeing an octopus is a big deal. So in the sea of content, be the octopus. That's what
yeah.
That may be too weird. Do you guys have any last thoughts on Q&A and the format of Q&A? I mean, I always love a lightning round.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I almost felt like I had to put the mic down because you do so well with these. So for me, it's kind of like, okay, here's the person that does everything for us. So just let Norma Jean go and take the reins on that personally.
Yeah.
The only thing I can add is even think about just what we talked about earlier about being a great host with multiple people in the room, right? The experience that you're going to create, kind of going into it before you even hit record, is something that you can do a lot of prepping for, right? So even before you hit record on the podcast, sending people, hey, this is usually the format for my show. Never underestimate how, even though you're putting a lot of content out, that the person who may be coming on your show may not have heard your show, may not be a longtime listener of your show, may not know the format of your show. So giving them those cues, hey, here's how my show usually runs, here's how I usually do the questions, things like that. It's going to help you because you know the format of your show. You know how you're structuring it. But then having them go into it and understand how you do it is going to make the post-editing process that much easier, the ability for you to get clips and things like that. So a lot of it, and again, maybe another catchphrase that I don't say too often, but it's something that I've said multiple times, is a lot of the best work that you can do is in your prep. So, you know, it sounds like a lot, and I know a lot of the prep work is what you do, Norma Jean. So it's like, you know, I think that there's so much that can be said just from that content that you put together for Podcasting Smarter for that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, you know, it's that setting yourself up for success, and an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You know, obviously there's always going to be moments in podcasting, right? Like the microphone octopus situation. But at the same time, you know, I think it's something where, you know, oh no, I've lost them again. Oh no. I think it's something where, you know, when you're thinking about
trying so hard,
okay.
stop.
We're good. I think it's something where, in terms of setting everything up for success, you want to make sure that you have space and that you can always edit. And John, I also love what you said about, you know, in terms of being able to run a room or manage multiple guests or a panel. That doesn't apply to every podcast, right? But when it does, you just want to know that everybody feels heard. I think that that's a really big one, that everybody has an opportunity to provide value and to state, you know, their expertise. I think that's a really big one. And to keep it moving. I think those, for me, those would kind of be the biggest ones, to let everybody feel heard, to stay on topic, and to keep it moving, to keep, you know, especially live, right? Or if you're, you know, leading a panel or speaking at a conference, for example, you have to be very wary of time. So you want to just make sure that practice, you know, you want to make sure that you have the time to practice and that you have the time to go over things so that everybody does feel heard, can share their expertise, and that the attendee or the listener is going to get that value. So be focused on the value that you're providing as well.
One thing that I'll also add is, you know, we're talking about planning your episodes, planning content, things like that. If you go over to Podbean Academy, we have a lot of content on that for our How to Start a Podcast track, but we specifically have one about planning your content in advance, planning your content, planning your episodes. Ronnie did a great job of putting together that content, and then you're hearing my voice basically regurgitating their words. But I think that between all of that, you'll get a really great insight on how you can structure your episodes, and by that, using that to also help inform your interviews. So yeah, definitely go check that out too.
And I love what you said. And in terms of planning that content out for a Q&A, which specifically this question is about, it's something where, you know, the platform is also going to be important. Q&As a lot of the time are live. You can ask people to submit questions in advance like we did today, but also, you know, you can run it on Podbean Live. You can run it on Discord. You can run it on several different streaming platforms. So just think about, you know, the interaction you want to have, the planning of it, the platform, the promotion. These are all things that you want to include. And if you do have one coming up that is live, you know, you can start promoting it in your episodes. So just know that there's a lot of different ways to create that engagement, you know, on social, you know, make sure you have a call out for questions, things like that, as well is really great. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. If you do have any other questions, reach out to us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. I'm going to read our brief outro, and then we will wrap up today. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been so fun. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at Podcasting Smarter for our February live event, the Podbean AMA, where we've hopefully answered all of your podcasting questions. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Podcasting Smarter has live stream sessions like this one with top podcasters and industry experts. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Podcasting Smarter podcast. If you joined late or you want to have another listen to this conversation, you can replay this live stream on Podbean's YouTube channel, and on the Podcasting Smarter podcast, we'll have some episodes with some of your questions. This is just one of our live events, and we have some really fun opportunities for you to join our community. Coming up at the end of February, we've got Amplify and Thrive podcast growth tips from a Black-owned podcast business with Bethany Hawkins of Crackers and Soup. And in March, we've got an incredible event on Podbean AI coming up March 7th. And on March 14th, we have a great event on branded podcasting with the Royal Naval Lifeboat Institution and how they've created a podcast to celebrate the 200th year anniversary of the charity. Podcasting Smarter is brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 640,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. And like I mentioned, if you have any questions, you can always email us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for more podcasting tips and best practices. Happy podcasting, everyone. Thanks, John. Thanks, Ronnie.